So we're going to look at how to mark on diagrams when I have congruent pieces, so congruent angles or congruent segments or sides. So in this first example on the left, we're given some information up here that segment FH is congruent to segment GH. So as a reminder, this symbol means congruent. It's an equal sign with like a little squiggly on top of it. So in order to mark that information on the diagram, I'm going to put a little tick mark through each of these segments. So FH is congruent to segment GH. So that makes this an isosceles triangle because two of its sides are congruent. So now that I know it's isosceles, I also know that there are some congruent angles in this triangle. Now just from looking at this one, I can tell these are the two angles that must be congruent to each other. This one appears to be quite a bit smaller than the other two. If you're ever in a situation where you can't tell that for sure, the angles that are across from or opposite from the congruent sides will be the base angles or the congruent angles. So from side FH, that's one of the sides that has the mark. If I just draw a little dotted line coming out from it, that will hit the other congruent angle. And then same thing from this side, I can draw us a little dotted segment coming out, and that will run into the other congruent angle. So to mark that two angles are congruent, I draw this teeny little arc in the corner. So these arcs mean that those two angles are congruent to each other. Let's take a look at our other triangle. So this time we're told that two angles are congruent. Angle LJK is congruent to angle KLJ. So as a reminder, when we're naming an angle, the middle letter is the vertex. So this angle is the one with vertex J. So I'm going to mark that that angle is congruent to this one, but I need to use two little arcs this time because I used one arc over here, but these two angles are congruent to each other, but not to the angles from the first triangle. So the second angle here that it's congruent to has vertex L. So at vertex L, I'm going to put my other two arcs. So here is one pair of congruent angles, and here is a different pair of congruent angles. Now again, this is an isosceles triangle. I know that because two angles are congruent, which means two of the sides have to be congruent as well. So just like we discussed with this first triangle, the sides and angles opposite each other will be those that are congruent. So opposite angle L is JK. So I'm going to put two tick marks here. Aside from angle J, the opposite side from angle J would be over here. So again, I'll put two tick marks. I used one tick mark here to indicate that these two segments were congruent. This is a different pair of segments, not congruent to the original two, but congruent to each other. So I used two tick marks there.